ABC News. This is Today.
This morning on today's Daily Dose, dealing with aging. The single fastest growing age group are those reaching 100 years old. But what can you expect from your mind and your body when you age? We've got Dr. Marc Agronin. He's a geriatric psychiatrist and the author of How We Age, A Doctor's Journey into the Heart of Growing Old. And also, of course, returning now is Dr. Nancy Snyderman, NBC's chief medical editor. Good morning to both of you once again.
Good morning.
So, Dr. Agronin, let me start with you because, you know, you just mentioned to me earlier that the average age of the people you work with is 90.
Yes.
So what does this tell you, given that there is such an anti-aging bias in our country? What does that teach you or tell you about aging that perhaps we could maybe gain from?
I think sometimes we tend to focus too much on the downside of aging, on the losses people face as they age, on illness, on death. What I've seen from working with older individuals is that we have to also focus on the positive elements, the fact that even as we age, there are new opportunities and new connections, and for so many individuals, it can really be a wonderful time of life.
I think for a lot of us, this is news that there is an upside.
Well, I think for a lot of baby boomers, it's like, well, I'm not going to die. No, that's not an option. You're going to. The question is, how do you embrace that second half of your life and own it? And I think that's where the extraordinary, exciting work is being done.
It's true. It has to be not just about living longer, but living better.
Yeah.
And the fact is that these are opportunities that we all have, but we have to have a positive attitude about it.
Live more deeply with a richer sense of life and sort of making the connections you're talking about in our minds in a joyful way.
It's true. And as people get older, we also see that they have a better ability to be more positive. Contrary to what people think, we tend to think that most people are depressed as they get older, but that's simply not true.
Well, maybe that's an example of our first question. We've got an email question from Anne, and she writes, my father, 82, has Alzheimer's that he developed quickly over the last few months, and it has been terrible to see him go through this. How can I protect myself from this disease? Is there clear evidence that we can prevent Alzheimer's?
This is one of the most common concerns that children and grandchildren have of an older relative. Not every memory lapse as we get older means Alzheimer's disease. And so my first question would be, is this actually Alzheimer's disease? There could be some other form of memory impairment, many of which are reversible. So the person really needs a thorough evaluation. The main risk factor is age. The older we get, the greater risk there is of Alzheimer's disease, even more so than genetic factors.
Are you suggesting, I mean, certainly she's probably had her father looked at. I mean, are you suggesting that sometimes doctors might, and maybe this is a question for you, Nancy, might look at an elderly person and maybe not go into sort of looking at all the possible other options?
I think the dangerous thing is to make the assumption that the correct diagnosis has been made, and not all dementia is Alzheimer's. And I would say to every baby boomer kid, parent, middle child out there, go to your parents' medicine cabinet and pull everything out, because sometimes drug-drug interaction can masquerade as dementia, which is automatically diagnosed as Alzheimer's, which takes you down the wrong path. Okay. They are not all the same thing.
Barbara?
It's true. You'd hate to make a diagnosis when it's really not true.
Right.
Right. Okay. So that's so we almost have to kind of be our parents' advocate as well.
Absolutely.
And all that. Okay. Barbara in Lowell, Massachusetts is on Skype. Hello, Barbara. What's your question?
Well, my question is, how will compression of morbidity affect the baby boomers?
Well, that's a smart question, Barbara. What do you think, Dr. Agronin?
Well, our greatest fear of aging is that we'll be sick and suffering a long time before we pass away. And so this term compression of morbidity really refers to the hope that it will be a very short period of time in which we would be ill before we actually die.
I see. Okay. Thank you so much, Barbara, for your question. Let's move on to an email from Peggy, and she's from Wilmington, North Carolina. She writes, I am 79 and I'm on oxygen 24/7. It is more my mental feelings that bother me most. Nothing to look forward to, a feeling of hopelessness that is ongoing. The most exciting thing in my life is when my Star magazine comes. Okay, doctor, help us out.
This is someone who definitely needs more social and mental stimulation from a family or activities in the community. But I also would be concerned whether there's an element of depression. And so she really needs an evaluation. There's effective treatment, both talk therapy and medications. In the book, I talk about a 96-year-old man who came to me with recurrent depression, and yet we worked with him. He thrived in therapy. He came back to me and said, I have to tell you, my life has been turned around. And this is at 96, when we tend to write people off that they can't make change, and yet it is possible.
And we do know that people who are depressed feel worse. When you feel worse, you're more depressed, and it becomes this very vicious vicious cycle. And in some cases, I think medications may also be indicated, you know, in some geriatric patients for antidepressants. But usually, you have to at least extricate people from the depression and figure out what's causing it and break that cycle.
You're really talking about taking a new look at aging so that we will enhance our ability to have rich, full lives all the way up until we can't have one anymore. In other words,
Absolutely.
rethink that and not write ourselves or our family members off.
Slide out at home plate.
All right.
Live
Yes.
it big and slide out. Don't do anything that draws out the bad stuff. Live a big life, do it right, and slide out.
It's never too late to make changes.
All right, and the book is called How We Age. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Dr.
so
Marc
much.
Agronin and Nancy, as always. And coming up next, how to get